Greg, thank you so much for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, sir. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you again. Just don't call me sir.
Okay,
Whatever you do. All right. You know what? Let's jump in with a little bit of the Sourcetoad story here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey building Sourcetoad.
Yeah. So I grew up in South Africa with a grandfather who worked for IBM. He taught me to code when I was like 8 years old. Started, dyslexic kid. Programming seemed like a good outlet for somebody who was struggling with reading and writing, and it really did help actually. So you learn that your fingers are different letters on a keyboard, and then you learn that you can make the computer do interesting things, and makes you feel like you actually have some control of your world. And I moved to the States, worked in investment banks, worked in software companies, and in 2008 started my own consultancy, which was never really meant to be anything other than a way for me not to have a real job. And it just kind of grew. It grew a life of its own at first, as we were successful through luck or through skill or a combination. And today we find ourselves in a much more organized and structured company that has a purpose and has evolved from those early stages into a company of 60 plus people, mainly in Tampa, Florida, but all around the United States and the world now. And we build software for well-funded startups, big franchise companies, and even a couple of Fortune 50 companies. So it's been a pretty interesting journey to get here, and we get to do a whole bunch of really fun, interesting stuff all the time and learn about the world.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's talk about some of the interesting stuff that you guys do, because I think there's been some really cool use cases, really cool stories of a lot of things you've done, but in particular, helping traditional businesses or non-tech companies become more tech or tech-enabled businesses. There's not a whole lot of companies out there that don't want to have some level of tech enablement. What kind of work do you do in that realm for businesses that are looking to increase the value of their business in that way?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I mean, typically what we do is we focus on companies who they have some sort of pre-existing product, or their value is not purely in the technology, right? So we let's say you have a franchise of car washes. I don't know. My son's really into car washes at the moment, so it springs to mind. And you want to kind of enable your customers to get in and out of the car washes quicker. So you want to build a mobile app that you just tap and it starts the car wash and you go through, and you don't have to fiddle with the machine and pay. We're the kind that's where we drive a lot of value, right? Is in taking something that could be a traditional service or product and tech enabling it. So a lot of companies have actually gone through something like that in the past, and it may have been in the 90s or the 80s or even the 70s in some cases, even in the 2000s. And the technology that they have has now become a burden. A good example is we have a client who's basically a kind of a type of bank, and they have a risk profile management system, and they do they have a money transfer system, and a lot of that stuff sitting in the back room was running off old, AS400s or old school mainframes. Oh. And so you come to a company like that, and they're kind of a technology company already. They've got maybe some of their own developers, but the technology that they have is not allowing them to move forward into kind of the modern world of where the web's going and mobile devices, or being able to embed their technology in their clients' applications and those kind of things. And so typically what we do in working with companies like that is we'll start in the middle, which is a weird place to start, right? So we'll build something that interfaces with the old system, and then we'll just focus on one tiny use case for the outward facing system. So we put something in between the mainframe and the user, and we allow that to be their customers or their clients to use that external facing application. And then we try and like work with the client to, at the same time, put out a big press release about this cool new technology. So let's say now I'm going to be able to use, I'm going to be able to transfer money using the system with this one SDK that talks to the old mainframe. Nobody knows what's on the other side, right, of the middleware. They're just looking at the cool new shiny thing that they can put in their app. And then you get a press release and you get some press for that. And now people start to like think, hey, who's this sleepy company doing this cool new shiny stuff? And then what you do is you replace bit by bit through the middleware one of those legacy systems. And each time you replace that, you put out on the front end a kind of a shiny feature that you also push out with a big press release. And people get used to the fact that you are now becoming a modern, dynamic, innovative company, when in fact, really what you're doing is you're leveraging all the stuff that you're really, really good at anyway, and you've been doing for a long time, and just like making it accessible in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. So how does that message resonate at first with a more traditional business that isn't used to that type of innovation or that type of rollout? I
mean, I think every business has to be to some degree in the technology space, right? It's just, if it's, everyone's got a website at least, and then there's always some way for you to make your business more efficient for your employees or for your customers. There's new ways of surprising and delighting your clients, your customers, giving them easier ways to pay, or getting 24-hour access to your product, whatever it is. And so it comes down to creativity, and it comes down to being able to work with a good partner who can kind of see what the next steps are. If you have a traditional business that sells pool supplies or something like that, right? And you want to, you can have an app that can tell you when the stores are open to go and buy the pool supplies, or you can put e-commerce into the app, right? Or you can make it so you can have appointments in the app so that you can come get your pool. I don't know why we're talking about pools now, but pools and car washes are on my mind. So it comes down to creativity, and comes down to actually talking to your clients, talking to your end users. For some reason, this gets like lost a lot in the kind of strategic planning thing, which is, why don't we actually go and sit down and talk to our existing customers and find out what they want and what would make their life easier? And so a lot of the time what we do is we're actually going to meet our clients' customers. A couple of months ago, I was sitting in an airport talking to a lady in her 80s about fur storage. And apparently you like, when you take your furs off, you have to put them into like a special type of storage. Like, I don't know much about that. I don't wear furs, but like there's a special like refrigerated, I think, type of storage for furs. And I sat with a lady in her 80s doing sketches at an airport where I went to go meet her. And I discovered like 30 things that our client had not told us about their end users, just from having this one weird conversation.
Interesting. Yeah. Is that a common challenge that you find on the onset of some of this discovery work, if you will, is not really speaking to their customer?
I think that the people who make strategic decisions a lot of the time are fairly far removed from customers. Yeah. It's pretty common. We are also we have a different kind of mind space or head space, which is that when you design something, you need to design it with empathy. You have to have empathy for your stakeholders, your coworkers, but ultimately you have to have empathy for the person who's going to use it, the actual end user. If you deploy some piece of software and then you go and you watch people use it in real life and something's going wrong, you get two pieces of information out of that. One is you actually see how people are using it, and you can tweak that and make it better. But also you can feel a sense of ownership of that thing, like seeing it out in the real world and like seeing actual human beings touch it. It's like, why else do this work, right? So if you do that enough, what you'll find is that you should actually start at that process, right? Like, so we have we've kind of drilled it into our team's heads here that this is the way to go. And I mean, just recently we had an argument in a meeting room the other day about who was going to get to run a pothole repair crew. It was going to go along with the pothole repair truck or asphalt repair, because we're building a big system for a company doing that. And so the guys want to go out and fill potholes because they know that the guys driving the trucks are going to use the app, or the customers who they're meeting to requesting the asphalt repair, they're going to be using a website or however it's going to work. But actually being there on the job site, actually being there and like working with the people who are going to be using it, means that when you sit down to design it and program it, you're going to know who that person is. You're going to like walked a mile in their shoes, and you're going to be able to think a little bit like them. And I think it would be beneficial for all of us to just, go down and do the line worker's job once in a while, just so we can be closer to the work. And then, because you can take that and then all your experience that you have in either strategy or marketing or technology, whatever it is, and apply it in that situation, right? And it's very different from reading a bunch of customer surveys in your, I don't want to say your ivory tower or whatever, but you reading a bunch of customer surveys and then trying to divine or read the tea leaves of what should be the next feature release.
What are some other common challenges that non-tech companies face when making that transition, and how can they think forward towards overcoming some of those obstacles?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one that jumps out to me, maybe it's because it's recency bias, but the last couple of strange conversations I've had have all revolved around, what the future of technology looks like with AI or with machine learning, and how that's kind of different from the typical procedural stuff that we've been doing for a long time. And the technology that is out there has now become well publicized enough and prevalent enough in like people's day-to-day use of it that most people have like a good understanding of what it can do, as opposed to like let's say blockchain, right? Everyone knew that blockchain was like a thing that was cool and interesting and that we should all be talking about. But the average person, even average business owner, didn't really understand like why or what it would do that would make everything better. It was just like blockchain is cool. Right. Whereas with like AI and the ML tools and some of the, kind of new, even good procedural stuff we have, it's obvious, right? You play with it. You can say, oh, it'd be cool if I could talk to my proposals. Like I'm going to submit proposals and I'm going to take my PDF of a proposal to build an Olympic stadium because I'm a construction company. I'm going to put it into this tool, and then I can actually talk to the proposal and ask it like the best way to solve certain challenges. Right. So like people understand that, but there's still like this weird gap about what the legal requirements and the intellectual property implications are going to be. There's a gap between what is doable right now today that you're seeing in like tech demos, and maybe what is actually doable maybe in a year or two. And then there's my favorite one is the jump that you have between, well, I would like the system to do these three things, and these are all pretty standard, straightforward things. And then the last one is like some giant computer vision issue or large AI task that is 10 times more complicated than the other three things mentioned as main features. And so there's quite a lack of understanding, I think, in a lot of business executives about what's easy and what's difficult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are some practical examples of how you and the Sourcetoad team or even customers are using things like GPT-4 or other AI ML tools?
Yeah, so I'll give you a cool, shiny new one that we just did, and then kind of a scary one as well, if you want. So the first one is we have a client who is they provide the textbook, the curricula, the grading system, everything, soup to nuts for middle school science students. And they have hundreds of thousands of concurrent users using the system every day. So it's a big, complicated, powerful system that is touching a lot of people's lives. And it has like the teacher's notes, and it has collaboration tools, and we've been building it with them for 10 plus years now. And we've now, one of the issues is you want to kind of start dipping your toe in the AI kind of space, but you don't also want to like give kids the answer. So if you give them some sort of chatbot to talk to, you can actually undermine the teacher in the classroom. And so what we've built is a system that is tuned to the textbook and to the outcomes that the teacher is trying to guide the students to. So the teacher will ask a certain type of question and try and like lead the students to the answer, or try and like help them think it through themselves, rather than like, hey, here's actually how the mechanics of particle physics work, or molecular biology or something. We're going to actually talk about it and see if we can work it out ourselves. So now you want to have a chatbot inserted into that situation for helping the students, but that will refuse to give them the answer, right? And will continue to ask them questions in the same way that the teacher does. So we have our AI systems reading the teacher's guides ahead, where it's reading the students' guides. It's looking at the questions and the answers that are expected, because it does the automated grading as well. And so its personality is being developed, and it's called tuning, to actually have the AI refuse to answer these questions. And it's funny, you can beat on it. You can be like a rude middle schooler telling like bum jokes or whatever, and it will the AI acts like a middle school teacher. It does not take any BS from anybody, and it's not going to give you the answer, but it will help you and give you cues and clues. So it's like super cool.
Yeah, that is really cool.
But like, I'll give you a scary example, which is that we have a client who has been working on a machine learning project to categorize industries and businesses for merger and acquisition purposes. And so they have a machine learning system that scrapes data from millions of websites and tries to learn about the companies and tries to work out what verticals they're in, and looks at like LinkedIn data and makes assumptions about where revenue is split amongst various verticals and like what they might contribute to what EBITDA, whatever. It's crazy. And our system that we've built lives on top of that, and it's the interface for the bankers to be able to call up this information and do interesting things with it. The ML system has taken about 2 years to build, and we were working with another partner of theirs to do that. And it cost, I don't even know what it cost to build this thing. I mean, months and months, every single month they're working on it for the last 2 years. And our director of engineering the other day said, hey, let me I have an idea. Let me take a stab at this. Trying to recreate what this machine learning company and machine learning system had done, just using OpenAI, just as an experiment, right? So he went off with one of our senior developers, and the two of them got together, and one senior developer, June, she started working on just something over the weekend and came back like 2 days later and reproduced, I would say, 85% of what the machine learning system had done in 2 days. So $500,000 worth of work or something like that, just duplicated in 2 days. And that's the stuff that's scary.
Yeah, that is scary. What was the feedback from the client?
I mean, a mixture between disbelief and gratitude, but also, I mean, like, to be honest, they have enough money where like they don't really ever suffer buyer's remorse. It doesn't matter to them. So like, if it was me, I would have been like, I just spent that much money for the last 2 years. But like, these guys don't care. I mean, they, have like Ferrari collections and stuff like that, but whatever. But so, yeah, they were very happy. They were super excited.
So what are the limitations and potential risks that companies should be aware of when, whether it's, any sort of AI ML, but it's particularly GPT-4, since so many companies are beginning to use that as their infancy start into AI. What when they're starting to integrate that into operations, what are some limitations and risks they should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think the common ones are going to be managing the data and the responses, right? So, is the data that I'm being given back from the system accurate? And, we all know that GPT and GPT-4 have has a tendency to sound extremely confident in its answers, and especially if you've been given 20 correct answers in a row, or like seemingly accurate, intelligent answers in a row, that does not mean that the 21st will be accurate. And, we I was using it to code something myself the other day, and it pulled in an API. I'm like, I didn't even know about this API. This is great. And I used it, and it was like, oh, it didn't work. Turns out the API didn't exist. ChatGPT it hallucinated that API, which is great. Fine. So you need some sort of systems in place to monitor and have some like human QA on the actual results. So that's always one thing to worry about. Ownership rights, IP, intellectual property rights. These are. I'm not an attorney, but you should probably talk to a smart lawyer about these kind of applications if you're going to be using them in a commercial sense. How does it go? You can, a machine or machine generated system cannot be intellectual property. You can't copyright only extends to humans. Like where there was the case of where a monkey took the guy's camera and took a photo of himself, and the photo won some prize, and then the guy tried to sell it, and it turned out that had no protection because the monkey took the picture. Right? Which is crazy. But that now when you have a machine learning or an AI system that is learning on other people's artwork to make its own artwork, and you use that, you actually are still liable if it's found to have been derivative of or borrowing from somebody else's work. So even though the machine made the system and you had no idea what it was building using as a reference point, and then you go and use it, you are still liable. So it is the worst of both worlds. So you just have to be careful and like know what the application is. I think those are the two big ones. And the other thing to know is its limitation, right? Like large learning models are really cool, but they're good for doing like computational stuff around writing. They're not good at doing actual computation. They're not super great at like logic problems and they're getting better every day, but they're not magic, and they're not like the smart person they're like a genie in your pocket.
Right. And they're not the replacement for the expert yet. Right. In many cases, they're productivity or efficiency tools to improve the expert's speed or make them more efficient or effective because they have the expertise to apply on top of it. But what happens when, or does it ever happen that it becomes a replacement for the expert?
Yeah. I worry about this quite a lot, actually. So, So, I mean, I use these tools myself when coding now, and I'm not a great programmer anymore, to be honest. But so these tools are like very powerful for me. Yeah. But let's say, for example, the people who work here in this office, way smarter than I am and way better programmers. And what they're finding is that these tools are really good for like error checking, finding mistakes, and writing tests. They're not there yet completely for full generative, like good complicated code, but they're good assistants. That doesn't mean that we're not far off from the fact that they might be able to replace a junior developer, a beginner who's like would be like an apprentice at Sourcetoad.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is that if you extrapolate that out, that in the future, it's imaginable that you'll have human experts, guiding these systems to build things and then being able to check what they're doing, because they will still hallucinate and they will still make logical problems and they will still not be able to know everything about what the ultimate goal of a system is. They might be able to lack the capacity to hold the entire project, quote unquote, in its head. And they have this thing called context. And I've actually been programming with the systems before where they run out of context, where you work and you work and you work and it's great. And all of a sudden it just starts going crazy. And it's because it just ran out of context. So it no longer remembers what it did at the beginning.
Right.
Whereas a human being is constantly remembering like why they're doing this, right? And that'll get better. But then the question is, how do you train people in the future if there's no space, if there's no career path for a junior to become a mid-level, for a mid-level to become a senior, for a senior to become like an architect? How do you train people in that path moving forward?
Yeah.
So I'll give you a scary example. I mean, this is kind of stupid and embarrassing, but I played D&D. Yeah, whatever. I'm the CEO of a software company. It's not unexpected.
No, it's not. It's expected. Yeah, exactly.
And we're playing a version at the moment where we play this like spy game version, and so I built these hacking challenges, and I used ChatGPT 4 to write some code to break into. Well, I wrote like a password system to break into a security camera, so you can disable security cameras. Judge me all you want. It's fine. It's cool. Everyone's a nerd here, and so I just asked it to generate the password protection code, and it did, and it encoded the password in base64 inside the code. And I looked at it, I'm like, oh, this is great. This is perfect. That's easy to crack. My players can go in and quote unquote hack into the system, and it'll be easy for them to hack it. And then what struck me is the thought that if I wasn't a software engineer, if I wasn't at least even a crappy programmer, and I looked at this, I'd be like, oh, great. I've just written like a password protection system to put something behind. And that is in no way secure. I mean, like, it's fine for a D&D game as a joke to hack into, but it is not acceptable in the real world.
Right.
And so you have to be an expert yourself to be able to even recognize what this stuff does, because it will run, and it runs well. Like, it generates working code that just might not be secure, or will leak your HIPAA data out to the world, or something awful, right? So you have to be really, really careful with that stuff.
No, that's a great example. That's a great example. One thing that I've been super impressed by as you've grown your organization and the way that you do planning and strategy, whether it has to do with AI, ML, or other tech, or just in general, the way you run your business, is the emphasis that you've put on objectives and key results, right? And so I don't know the best way to start digging into this topic, but I've been kind of impressed by the way you run it. Maybe start with, has life always been easy street?
It hasn't. Yeah. I appreciate it. It's a very leading question, but yeah. Oh man. Where do I start with my romance of OKRs? It's an audio medium, but I've got John Darrow's book over there, which is called Measure What Matters. So as Sourcetoad grew, like I said, it kind of I took it from being a small consultancy to being a relatively large software development agency, and I didn't know how to run a company. I'd only run companies into the ground before this one. And, as we grew, I kind of felt more and more like I didn't know what I was doing. And I had no idea how to manage a company where I didn't know every single person anymore. And I couldn't have a daily chat with every human being. And so, I started kind of just reading everything I could. I'm a nerd. My mom told me there's a solution in a book somewhere for any problem you have. And I stumbled on Measure What Matters. And to be honest, it's not a great book. It's not, I don't really love the way it was written.
Not super actionable.
Yeah, it's like mainly about like Bono like bragging about how great like U2 is and whatever. But like the last 10 pages are life changing.
Yeah.
The last appendix at the back of the book is amazing, which breaks down how all you need to really do if you want to move an organization forward is set the goals of what you're trying to achieve, break those goals down into smaller steps, and then measure them in a certain way. And that's what OKRs are, right? And to me, like I was a man in the dark, and it was a flashlight, right? And so we absorbed OKRs very, very quickly. There's a bunch of these systems out there. EOS is another one that's kind of similar. What's it called? Like line of sight is another one of these kind of planning tools. But at the end of the day, and the fact that you have a tool and the fact that you're thinking at a strategic goal setting level is super important. And it allowed us to kind of break the company down into our overall objectives of what we're trying to do, and then work toward those objectives little by little each quarter. And it helped us grow a ton, to be honest. It like really helped us kind of put a framework around the company that made it feel like one thing rather than a bunch of different teams all just trying to work on client work. There's a caveat to this story, which is that at some point along the line, I realized that OKRs are not strategy. That strategic goal setting does not mean you have a strategy. You can have all the hand wavy, and so many companies do this, which is that like, well, what do we want to do? Well, we want to be our strategic goals are to be the best in our field, be the most respected organization in our field. We want to have the happiest employees, and we want to make the most profit. It's like, okay, great. That's not a strategy, dude. Like you. And there was I don't remember where I read it, but there was this thing that I use all the time, which I call the underlying idea, right? Like, what's the underlying idea of a company? So like, what is your like philosophical reason for something existing? And so going from that underlying idea is really where I realized that that's where strategy comes from. Like Sourcetoad is the idea behind Sourcetoad is that you get a bunch of smart people together, and then you feed them complicated, interesting problems that are brought in by outside clients. And then those people work together on solving those problems, which they find very rewarding. And then the clients will put money into the system to make it work. So then you can use that money to pay those people and to help grow them. And then that creates a virtuous feedback cycle, right? So you have ongoing client work that funds the development of the people who are enjoying solving these problems, which then in turn improves them, which makes them better at solving these problems and producing better outcomes, which then puts more client money into the system. And so what you get is a really like warm, supportive workplace that is self-sustaining and that is making a difference in the world and solving problems for real clients who have like real issues and helping to grow people at the same time. And from there, you can derive a strategy. Okay, well, how do you then get more clients? How do you then, having hand wavy goals is one thing, but it doesn't actually do anything unless it's driven by an actual strategy. So that was my big takeaway from kind of, I came to strategy from the opposite direction. I started at goal setting, worked out that like it was effective in moving things forward, but not in any one direction. And then kind of stumbled onto strategy, like kind of like discovered it as like an emergent entity or something.
Yeah. So whether you're using OKRs or some other type of operating system, what are some best practices for setting and tracking goals to ensure that they align with the company's strategic goals?
It's very, very interesting question. I think the first thing is that having a framework around your goal setting is fine. That can be hand wavy. So if let's say your strategy is that we're going to I don't know, we're gonna exploit every AI opportunity we can in terms of our marketing to use AI to improve all aspects of the company, because we're all in on being like the best AI company in the world, right? That's a little hand wavy as well, but fine. And you can break that into categories, and those main categories would be, let's say, use AI systems internally, use AI systems for our client work, and use AI systems for all of our marketing. I don't know, whatever. That only works if everyone understands why you're doing it. That's the first thing. So you need that underlying idea that you can explain to everybody. So once you've explained that to everybody, you need to get buy-in from the top and the bottom. So the way that OKRs work the best, in my opinion, is if we have like the overall goal set by the CEO. That's the CEO's job. The CEO's job is to go and talk to, and maybe this their assistant or CEO as well, but they should go and talk to customers, clients, stakeholders, investors, employees, everyone in the organization, and they should be able to know where they're going to go next. And they said they kind of distill those top level goals into, I want to say, between 5 and 7 top level company objectives. No more than that in a quarter. It's not durable. And then each one of those are then distributed to the entire organization. Once that's done, everyone understands them, and they'll be able to see how those high level goals will contribute to where the company wants to go. Like, they should be obvious. My top level, the CEO's 7 goals for the quarter should be obvious about, and obviously aligned to like the strategy of the company. If they're not, it's not obvious, he's done it wrong or she's done it wrong. The next step is for the teams who are going to be in charge of executing on those objectives, which can be fluffy, right? Like they can be improve customer satisfaction, right? It doesn't have to even have a number to it, because the CEO is just saying like, hey, we need to get customers feeling better about something. That can be hand wavy, but the next rung down, the team who needs to be able to measure that, they need to put a number on it. They need like SMART goals, right? It needs to be measurable, achievable, all that kind of stuff. And so they need to break up their goal planning in a slightly different way. And the way I like to do it is to give everyone a quota. You're only allowed X amount per subcategory. So I think like my categories are, you can't do less than 3 and you can't do more than 6 per level down. And that means that a department head, the head of a department, gets to pick 2 goals or 2 objectives that they're going to contribute upward. And then the remaining 3 or 4 that are going to be associated with the success metric, they have to be derived from their team coming bottom up. So you get to pick 2 as the department head, and then you have to work as a team to pick the rest. And that kind of forces buy-in from everybody, because then almost everybody in the organization has been involved in the strategic planning process. Sorry, the strategic goal planning process. I don't want to say that's strategy. And then the thing that's like critical is the ceremonies around it. OKRs do not work, or any kind of strategic goal planning does not work, unless it works every single week or whatever it is at the executive level. And then that is basically copied and pasted down throughout the organization. So the way I've done it is every Monday morning, my executive team and I have an OKR planning meeting where we run through every single thing that we're responsible for. Everyone goes around and we check in our key results together, and we see if we need help on anything, because a lot of these are cross-departmental, obviously, at that level. And we talk openly. Everyone understands where we are in the process, and we all check it in together, do our check-ins together. Then our department heads basically have a copy-paste meeting version of that with their direct reports, right? And so I facilitate the OKR meeting at the executive level. Then my department heads facilitate the OKR meetings at their level, at their team, at their department level. And then their team leads will also do the same thing in their weekly meetings. And so you're kind of setting the example from the top down that this is important, and that also like how it's done. Like, oh, we're going to see who's responsible for everything. How are you doing on that? How can I help you? What assistance do you need from the departments? Do you need more budget for something? How do you need this to work down? And as a result, it is unbelievably effective. like crazy effective. It's not a silver bullet because without strategy, it's meaningless, and you can have the dumbest goals in the world if you don't have a strategy. But from just a purely like execution level, because that's what OKRs are, they're about execution.
Mm-hmm.
It is the most effective tool I've ever seen. Because the people at the end who are doing the work that like contributes up, they know why they're doing it. They can see the chain all the way down. They're like, oh, okay, I know if I do this, it'll contribute toward this thing, which will then get this thing done. So they feel empowered and they feel like part of the team. But they also only have a small thing to do, but you have enough people doing those small tasks that by the time they bubble up, you've changed the entire company. And we go back, everything's transparent in our OKR system. We use a piece of software to do it. There's a ton of them out there. You go back in time, and you see quarter after quarter, you'll just see like how far we've come.
What do you guys use for tracking?
We use a Jira plugin. We use Jira, Atlassian's Jira tool, which is a software development ticketing tool. Mm-hmm. And there's a plugin for it called Upraise. It's not the best thing on the planet, but because we're in Jira all day, every day, like our tool is like where we live, right? So we're always kind of logging in there. And so it's definitely good enough for us. All the developers have access to it, so everyone can see it. And the nice thing about it is for us in Jira, in Agile, which is Scrum, the way we kind of work on in cycles, there's this concept of proof of work. And so when you work on something, when you finish a ticket, you copy the link to the repository's commit message or the actual line of code that fixed that actual thing. Or if you did a design ticket, you paste a PDF of the design into that. And we do the same thing with OKRs because it's in Jira as well. So we post proof of work for everything we do all the way down throughout the organization.
Do you have any advice for folks that are in a similar state of growth to you, or that are growth stage companies, if you will, that can get started on something like OKRs if they're not already tracking goals in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the one thing that you need for starting any new goal, like organized goal tracking system, is patience. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. I happen to pick OKRs and I really like it. But it took us probably 2 years of struggling through it before we did it well.
Yeah.
And I mean, we still find like we're like 5 years in now on OKRs and we're still tweaking the way they work best for us. So you take the framework, but you can't be religious about it. You have to kind of make it your own. But that just requires patience. It just requires sticking to it and having the meetings and doing the ceremonies. And that's all it takes. It's just patience and practice.
Do you think that level of accountability and goal setting and tracking is a reason why you guys have the culture that you have? And not to give you too much of a shout out here, but I'm going to do it anyway. The reason that you're one of the best places to work in Tampa?
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I think culture is somewhat emergent, right? Like but it's also intentional. It's bottom up and top down, and OKRs kind of like represent that pretty well. Like everyone is included in where we're going and in the planning, and everybody, quote unquote, up top or at the executive team or main shareholders, they really care about the people who work here deeply. It's kind of a cliche to say your product is your people, but we're a professional service company who designs software for others. Yeah. So the thing we have is really smart people. And so fostering a really good culture through all sorts of things by empowering employees is really important to us. And OKRs is a very strong part of that system. Yeah. So I would say it's definitely one of the pillars of it.
What are the other pillars?
For it, I mean, every company is different. For us, one of them is like joy. So we're a nerdy group of people. We do we'll have capture the flag competitions and video game nights and things that are not exactly they're like benefits, right? But benefits are a way of showing your culture out externally in some ways, like saying what's important to you and saying that you value people having fun is extremely important. So, like video game night or pizza is not culture. Those are benefits. Yeah. Culture is, and this kind of annoys me because people like often think, oh, culture is so great. You have a bar in your office. Like, that's not culture. Culture is like how we treat each other. Culture is like how we interact with clients. Culture is how we will have each other's backs. Culture is our standards of quality, right? Or how we release code. That's culture. And that stuff is enforced all the time through, 100 little tiny good jobs and bad jobs that you say out loud, bits of feedback that you say like, hey, that was really good. Do that again. And that requires intention. That requires like, what kind of company do we want to be? We want to be a company that, I don't know, puts out really good quality code that doesn't break. So that means doing the hard work from in a managerial perspective of like looking at stuff that hasn't broken, which nobody goes looking for things that work, and then finding out who did them and then praising them for the fact that it hasn't broken in 3 weeks. Because most code in most companies doesn't do that. It breaks. And so like you need that intentionality. And yeah, so taking the time to find the work, find those spaces to do that work, that is useful to use a goal setting system. Like, hey, I've got to go and I got to set aside an hour a week to go and find things that have been stable so that I can give feedback to the person to tell them that they did such a good job here, because that will make them feel good and they will know what it means to do a good job.
Yeah, love that, man. That's good stuff. All right. Unfortunately, we've got to end the show today with our Founder 5. So I got 5 quick hit questions for you today before we sign off. So
bring them on.
Well, it's being brought. All right. Number 1, metric or KPI that you are relentlessly focused on at Sourcetoad.
Employee engagement number, employee engagement figure.
Good. All right. Top tip for growth stage founders like yourself.
Ooh. Try and work out the difference between a strategy and goal setting. Strategies you can test. They're theorems. They're theories about the world that you have. You can go and test them.
Nice. All right. Favorite book or podcast that's helped you to grow as a founder?
I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, Measure What Matters is probably there, but I think probably my favorite that I've read relatively recently is probably Good Strategy, Bad Strategy.
I'll get you a YouTube CD for or CD MP3 or something for your birthday, Greg. Now that I know you love YouTube so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, Richard Rumlet wrote Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's such a silly name for a book, but it's actually really, really great. I would highly recommend it. All right, next one. Piece of advice that counters traditional wisdom. Ooh, counters traditional wisdom. How much of a rebel am I? I think that the biggest impediment to most companies is the founder. I think that especially in early stage, like a founder is the most important person, but the second that you can work your way out of your job, the second that you can stop actually being involved in anything that you were good at, that's what got the company started, the better it is for the company. Love it. All right, last one. What is going to be the title of your autobiography? Oh my God. I don't know. Software and whiskey at sea, something like that. I don't know. Out to sea with bourbon and builds. I don't know, something like that. Oh, that's great, man. All right. You've given a ton to our listeners today, Greg. Time for a little bit of self-promotion. How can those listening help you out? Yeah, I mean,
this sounds maybe a little bit sycophantic, or maybe not. We don't need a ton of help. I think what makes us great is we love helping people. When we get to build systems with other companies, and we get to build things that make a dent in the world. And especially for companies who don't want to be like hardcore software development companies, we are a really good fit for them. We become like godparents to those products and those services that they launch, right? Like we love that. Like you get to work on a ton of cool, interesting stuff. So if you're a medium-sized or large organization who needs something to be enabled through technology, or you have a project that is up in smoke and in flames, reach out to us. We'll help you fix it.
Awesome. How can listeners get in touch with you?
They can go to our website at sourcetoad.com. They can email me directly at greg@sourcetoad.com.
Excellent, man. All right. It's a pleasure having you on the dirt today, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Thank you.